Okay, so we're on our last section of notes, which is pretty much just what we did yesterday with this extra step. So CPCTC stands for congruent parts of congruent triangles are congruent. Okay, that's why we abbreviated it, CPCTC. And so we're looking at this. Triangle A is congruent to triangle man by, so we check and say this is angle, angle, side, angle, angle, side. The triangle, the side is not in between the angles, so that's why it's angle, angle, side. So, okay, they've already labeled those three parts for us, but that also means that angle H has to be congruent to angle N. And side HY must be congruent to side MN. Because triangles are congruent, everything's the same. And so then EY is congruent to AN. So we use this to prove our triangles congruent in our statements. So here it wants us to take these, figure out are the triangles congruent, and then from that prove that angle 3 is congruent to angle 4. So the first two are given. Let's go ahead and label on here. So AC is congruent to AR. Angle 1 is congruent to angle 2. I need a third thing, so I check reflective sides, no, but I have vertical angles. And so that would be angle. I'm going to need to use the 3 letters to name it. So CAL is congruent to angle RAS. And that is vertical angles. And then I can prove that the triangles are congruent by my angle, angle, side. And then the last reason, if the triangles are congruent, I know these third angles must equal each other by the congruent parts of congruent triangles are congruent. Okay, so our next one we have our givens. So NLM, this angle right here, is congruent to LNO. And then OLN is congruent to MNL. So I mark them on here just because it's easier. Then I check and I have this reflexive side in the middle. And so I do LN is congruent to LN, that is reflexive. Therefore, my triangles NLM is congruent to LNO by my angle, side, angle. And because they are congruent, angle M is congruent to angle O by our CPCTC. Once you have that, flip over to the next page. Okay, so we have a given, X bisects AB. So when we have the word bisects, we have to define it. And so we look at our drawing and say, okay, if X is in the middle, AX has to equal BX. So AX is congruent to BX. We have the second given that AC is congruent to BC. And then we have this reflexive line in the middle. So CA is congruent to CA. And so then we check, we have three sides, so triangle ACX is congruent to triangle BCX by side, side, side. And then that means the angles all equal each other too, by CP, CTC. Okay, and our last one. So there are two parallel lines are given. So XY is parallel to ZW. ZY is parallel to XW. And remember, when we have parallel lines, we look for alternate interior angles. And so we look here, and angle 1 and angle 2 are alternate interior angles. And also 3 and 4, if this is our transversal, 3 and 4 are congruent with alternate interior angles. And then we check, so we have two angles. I don't know anything about my outside sides, but I have this reflexive side in the middle, so XZ is congruent to XZ by reflexive. And then I have my angle, side angle. The triangle WZX is congruent to triangle YXZ by side angle. And therefore, now I can prove that the other sides equal each other by my CP-CTC. Okay, that is all, so go ahead and work on your assignment on big ideas now.